Okay, so when most people hear the word creatine, they picture one thing: some 22-year-old guy at the gym, shaker bottle in hand, loading up before a workout. That's the image, right? It's been around forever, and it's always been marketed to that crowd: young, athletic, trying to build muscle fast. So it makes sense that most people over 60 have never even thought about it. Why would they? That assumption, though, it might be one of the most expensive health mistakes your generation is making. Because the research on creatine and aging, real, peer-reviewed, clinical research, tells a completely different story than the marketing ever did. We're talking about a naturally occurring compound that your body already makes, that's already in the food you eat, and that, as you get older, you start producing less and less of. And the effects of that decline? They're not subtle. Muscle loss that accelerates every decade after 50. Brain fog that people just chalk up to getting older. Fatigue that no amount of sleep seems to fix. Bone density changes that sneak up slowly until they don't. These things aren't inevitable. They're not just aging. Some of them are connected, at least in part, to this one compound dropping off quietly in the background. And a growing number of researchers and clinicians are now saying that creatine supplementation for adults over 60 might be one of the most underutilized health tools out there, not for bodybuilding, for healthy aging. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what creatine does, why it becomes especially important as you get older, and what the science actually says about adding a small amount to your morning coffee every day. Some of what I'm going to share is going to genuinely surprise you. Let's get into it. So let's start with the basics. What is creatine actually doing in your body? Your muscles and your brain run on energy. And the currency your cells use for that energy is something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. You don't need to memorize that. What you do need to understand is this: creatine is what your body uses to rapidly regenerate ATP. It's like a backup battery. When your cells burn through their immediate energy supply, creatine kicks in and recharges them fast. Your body makes some creatine on its own, in your liver, your kidneys, your pancreas, and you get more of it from food, mainly red meat and fish. But here's where it gets important for anyone watching this who's over 50. Your body's ability to make creatine declines with age, and most people aren't eating enough red meat or fish to compensate for that drop. So what happens? Your muscles start holding less creatine than they used to. Your brain holds less creatine than it used to. And the effects of that shortage play out slowly, quietly, in ways that most people never connect to this one underlying cause. Now stay with me here, because this is the part I really want you to sit with. After the age of 50, the average person loses somewhere between 1 and 2% of their muscle mass every single year. 1 to 2% sounds small. It doesn't sound alarming. But run that math out over a decade, and you're looking at losing 10 to 20% of your muscle. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between someone who can get up off the floor independently and someone who can't. That's the difference between catching yourself when you stumble and a fall that sends you to the emergency room. And muscle loss doesn't stop at strength. It pulls your metabolism down with it. Your blood sugar becomes harder to regulate. Your balance gets less reliable, not dramatically, just subtly, until one day it isn't subtle anymore. Recovery from illness takes longer. Even your mood takes a hit. Muscle does a lot more work in your body than most people realize, and when you start losing it, you feel it in ways you wouldn't necessarily connect to muscle at all. The official term for age-related muscle loss is sarcopenia, and it affects somewhere between 10 and 30% of adults over 60, meaning it's already impacting their daily function and they may not even know it. And what worries me about this is how invisible it is until it isn't. People don't notice it happening in real time. They notice it in moments. The day you realize you're struggling to carry groceries that used to feel easy. The morning your legs feel unreliable on the stairs. The weekend you can't keep up on a walk you used to do without thinking. By the time those moments arrive, the decline has already been going on for years. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because understanding what's at stake is the only reason to take the solution seriously. And the solution, or at least a meaningful part of it, might be sitting in a bag at your grocery store for about $30. So let's talk about what creatine actually does about all of this. The most well-documented benefit of creatine in older adults is what it does for muscle mass and physical strength. And I want to be clear about something. This is not about getting big. This is not about looking different. This is about preserving the muscle you have, slowing the loss that's already happening, and in many cases actually reversing some of it. When you supplement with creatine, you're essentially topping up your muscles' creatine stores, giving them more of that backup battery we talked about. And what that does is make your muscles more capable during physical activity. They can work harder, recover faster, and respond better to the effort you're putting in. Now here's the important nuance. Creatine works best when it's paired with some form of resistance exercise, even light resistance. We're not talking about hitting a gym 5 days a week. We're talking about bodyweight squats, resistance bands, light dumbbells, even just walking with purpose. Because what creatine does is amplify the signal your body sends when you exercise. The signal that says, we need to hold on to this muscle, maybe build a little more. A meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrients looked at 22 separate trials involving older adults supplementing with creatine, and the findings were pretty striking. Across the board, the adults who supplemented with creatine while doing resistance exercise gained significantly more lean muscle mass and strength compared to the placebo groups doing the same exercise. Meaningful, measurable differences in people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. That's not nothing. That's the kind of result that translates into getting off the floor more easily, into carrying your own groceries, into not needing to hold the railing every time you take the stairs. Now, and I want to be straight with you about this, creatine is not magic. It doesn't build muscle while you sit on the couch. What it does is make your efforts more effective. Think of it less like a supplement and more like a force multiplier. The work still has to happen, but less work needs to happen to get a meaningful result, which honestly is exactly what most people over 60 need to hear. And here's the thing about dosage, because I know that's what you're wondering. The research consistently points to a modest amount, around 3 to 5 grams per day for older adults. 1 teaspoon is roughly 5 grams. So we're literally talking about one small scoop stirred into your morning coffee. It dissolves easily, it's mostly tasteless, and you likely won't notice it's there. Actually, let me clarify that. Most people won't notice it's there. Some people find that creatine monohydrate, which is the most common form, has a very faint chalky quality in cold water. In hot coffee? You really can't tell, which is probably why this particular habit has caught on the way it has. The form matters, by the way. Creatine monohydrate is the one with decades of research behind it. It's the cheapest. It's the most studied. And despite what some premium supplement brands will tell you, the fancier forms, creatine HCl, buffered creatine, all of that, don't have meaningful evidence showing they outperform plain monohydrate. Save your money. Stick with the simple stuff. So we've covered what creatine does for your muscles. But this is the part that genuinely surprises most people, because it turns out your brain runs on the same ATP energy system as your muscles, and creatine plays a meaningful role up there too. Your brain is one of the most energy-hungry organs in your body. It accounts for about 20% of your total energy consumption, even though it's only about 2% of your body weight. And just like your muscles, your brain uses creatine to help regenerate that energy quickly, especially during periods of high demand, complex thinking, problem solving, trying to recall something that's right on the tip of your tongue. Brain creatine levels also decline with age, and researchers have started connecting that decline to some of the cognitive changes people commonly experience in their 60s and beyond. The mental fatigue, the slower recall, the difficulty concentrating for long stretches. Not all of that is just aging. Some of it may be a fuel supply problem. There was a study out of the University of Sydney. They looked at adults who supplemented with creatine for just 4 weeks, and they found measurable improvements in working memory and processing speed compared to the placebo group. These were healthy older adults, not people with diagnosed cognitive decline, just people who topped up their creatine levels and then performed noticeably better on cognitive tasks. Creatine is not a dementia treatment. I want to be upfront about that. It's not going to reverse serious cognitive disease. But as a daily support for the kind of mental sharpness most people want to hold on to as they age, the evidence is genuinely promising. And given that it's safe, inexpensive, and you're already taking it for your muscles, the brain benefit is essentially a bonus. I had a patient, older gentleman, early 70s, who came in frustrated. Sharp guy, always had been. But he was noticing it taking longer to find words, getting mentally worn out earlier in the day than he used to. His blood work looked fine, and nobody had given him a satisfying answer. We talked about creatine, among other things. He was skeptical. Same reaction most people have. But he tried it. A few months later, he told me he felt like someone had turned the lights back up a little. He was careful not to oversell it, but he kept taking it. One person's experience isn't data, but it stuck with me because it lined up with what the research was showing, that for people whose creatine levels have dropped off significantly, replenishing those stores can make a real difference in how they feel day to day. And this is the part I want you to sit with. The time to act on something like this isn't when things have gotten bad. It's now. Because what we're talking about isn't reversing serious decline. It's protecting the function you still have. And if you wait until the warning signs are loud enough to ignore, you've already lost ground you're not getting back. I think about the people I've talked to who wished they'd started sooner. Not people who were sick, people who were fine, who felt like they had time. And then one day, they realized the stairs felt harder than they used to, that they were skipping things, walks, grandkids' games, trips, not because they didn't want to go, but because they weren't sure they could keep up. That's not a dramatic story. That's just what slow decline looks like from the inside, and the frustrating thing is, for some of them, it didn't have to go that way. So with that in mind, let's talk about the last piece of this puzzle, bone density. That's the one most people don't see coming. Because when you think about creatine, you think muscles. Maybe now you're thinking brain. But bones, that feels like a stretch, except it's not. And once you understand why, it makes complete sense. Your bones are living tissue. They're constantly being broken down and rebuilt. And that rebuilding process is driven largely by the mechanical stress your muscles place on your skeleton. When your muscles pull on your bones during movement and exercise, it signals the bone-building cells to get to work. Strong, active muscles mean stronger signals. Stronger signals mean denser, more resilient bones. So when creatine helps you maintain muscle mass and stay active, it's not just protecting your muscles, it's protecting your bones indirectly. But it goes further than that. There's emerging research suggesting creatine may have a more direct effect on bone health as well, not just through the muscle pathway, but through its influence on the bone-building process itself. A review published in Nutrients looked at this specifically in older adults and found that creatine supplementation combined with resistance exercise was associated with improvements in bone density and bone formation, meaningful numbers in a population where bone loss is one of the leading causes of serious injury and lost independence. This is where it all starts to connect: muscle, brain, bone. These aren't three separate conversations. They're one conversation about what it actually takes to stay functional and independent as you age. And creatine touches all three in ways most people have never been told. Now, safety. Because I know that's on your mind, and I want to give you a straight answer. The safety record on creatine monohydrate is strong. Decades of studies, wide range of populations, and the side effects for most healthy adults are minimal. Some people experience mild water retention in the first week or two as your muscles draw in a bit more fluid. That's actually part of how it works, and it typically levels off. Some people get mild digestive discomfort if they take it on an empty stomach, which is easy to fix. That said, if you have existing kidney disease or you're on medications that affect kidney function, talk to your doctor before adding creatine. The kidneys are involved in processing it, and while research in healthy adults shows no kidney damage from normal doses, that changes if your kidneys are already under strain. Same goes for any serious underlying health conditions. Check with your physician first. That's not a formality. That's just good sense. For everyone else, 3 to 5 grams a day in your morning coffee. No loading phase needed, no cycling on and off, just consistent daily use. And that's where the benefits build. And look, I know some of you are thinking, why hasn't my doctor mentioned this? That's a fair question. The research on creatine for older adults has accelerated a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. It's still catching up to clinical practice. A lot of physicians were trained when creatine lived entirely in the athletic performance world, and it just hasn't fully crossed over into conversations about healthy aging yet. That's part of why I make these videos. So here's where I want to leave you. One small scoop, every morning, in the drink you're already making. It's not a dramatic intervention. It doesn't require overhauling your life, but the evidence behind it, for your muscles, your mind, your bones, is real and it's solid. Pick up a bag of plain creatine monohydrate. Give it 60 days alongside whatever movement you're already doing. Then pay attention to how you feel. That's it. If this was useful, subscribe. I cover topics like this every week, stuff that's actually backed by research and relevant to where you are right now. And if you've tried creatine or you're thinking about starting, drop it in the comments. I'd genuinely love to hear your experience. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.